Welcome back to Call Me By Your Game, the podcast where I, your host, Connor McCabe, bring on a guest to hear from them about a meaningful or memorable video game from a particular moment in their life. On the show, we talk as much about what made playing that game special, memorable, or even fun for our guest. Sure, fun can even be a part of it, as we will get into the time and the context of when this guest had this meaningful experience with their video game. A little bit of housekeeping up top is that anything that my guest or I plug today, you can find links in the show notes of this podcast. So if you want to follow somebody on social media or check out another podcast, there's a link for you right there. You don't even have to search for it. Speaking of which, this podcast is all over social media. So if you want to follow us and interact with us there, which I highly recommend, you can find us on Instagram, Twitter, and Blue Sky, where you can find not only what episodes we have releasing weekly, you can learn about our guest, what they're up to, how to support them, and also see the gorgeous art that I make for every episode. You can also support the show a few different ways. You can do that by leaving us a rating and review wherever you get your podcasts. But if you do that on Apple, that's the only place I can see it. So I'll shout you out on the show. And if you do a review for us or leave a review elsewhere, feel free to DM me about it. I'm also on social media. My handles are in the show notes as well. And feel free to message me on like Twitter or Instagram if you'd like. Because we can't read the ones on other platforms. They don't show up publicly. So if you leave a review on Spotify or wherever you listen to the show, let me know. I love, it's a couple things that are going on with that. One, I love to hear what people are enjoying about the show. But two, it really helps our visibility and more people like you to find us. So yeah, leaving a rating and review is super helpful. You can also share the show with a friend, whether they love video games in general or the game that we've brought on for the main event today. You can also check out the show on YouTube, where we now have video versions of this podcast and a little bit more over there. So feel free to click subscribe and follow us on YouTube as well. If you'd like to see my face, the stuff behind me, maybe a filter on somebody's background, who knows? Check us out on YouTube. And lastly, you should check us out on Patreon. We're over at patreon.com/super NPC Radio, and that's where all of our bonus video game content lives. Of course, we have our free podcasts, I think 3 of which that release weekly on this network. Call Me By Your Game, which you're listening to, Reactivators, and also Video Games, a comedy show. We have bonus stuff there as well. For example, we at all times of the year, different quarters, we play through a game for our games club, which means we cover one game in a book club style format where we take a fine-tooth comb and just enjoy every little aspect, wring every little bit of juicy goodness out of each game. And we usually do those for about 10 to 12 weeks. If you would like to follow along with our current games club, which when this releases, there's already going to be episodes out, folks. We're covering Resident Evil 2 Remake, the game from 2019. And I gotta say, I'm having an absolute blast. So if you'd like that, check us out on Patreon. Those episodes release every Friday and much, much more. But that'll do it for the housekeeping, and I can finally introduce my guest for today's episode. So please welcome artist and streamer Roxy Polk.
Hi, Connor. Hi, everybody.
Hey, good to have you here. I left a little space there because I was like, I felt like that sentence was going to continue, but it was definitive. It was, hi, Connor. Hi, everybody. Roxy.
Oh, it's all good.
Hey, you and I, at this point, peek behind the curtain for the listener. We're in the middle of doing a podcast 3 days in a row with each other.
Yeah.
We did one yesterday. We've got one today, and we've got 2 tomorrow. So we're just, we're at that point where we're really a well-oiled machine. We're not making any mistakes. No one's talking over each other. We're crushing it, I think.
Ooh, setting the bar pretty high, but yes, let's say yes for sure. Nobody's talking over anybody.
As if we hadn't had confusion already on the episode. Roxy, I'm so excited to have you on the podcast today. This has been in the works for a long time.
Way too long
for a solo
on
episode.
my part.
Hey, you know what? Better late than never, and it's a delayed gratification, I think, is a thing that people point to as well. So
yeah, there you go.
We know there's a lot we can talk about, but you have been on this show a couple times before. You were originally on 3 years ago, which is crazy.
Oh
Where
gosh.
you and Mikey both came on to talk about Resident Evil 3. I think
Yes,
maybe was it the
remake. The
remake?
remake. Yep.
Yeah.
And then we did a Shadow of the Colossus episode, which
Yes, that
was
same
it Call Me
year.
by Your Game or a different one?
It was a Call Me by Your Game co-op episode.
Okay.
So one of those Patreon exclusives. That episode, the audio version is actually on YouTube in full. So if someone's listening to this and they're already like, "Oh my gosh, these two are so cool! I want to hear that episode about that amazing game." That's
Such a
on
good
YouTube. And it'll be in the free feed in a couple months as well. But so that's how we met. I mean, this is sort of a long, like, winding road to be like, we met through mutual friend and Patreon contributor Mikey McCaller.
Yeah.
Because you two knew each other from art school, correct?
Yes, we went to art school together. I didn't know Mikey freshman year, but I think he was a friend of a friend as well.
Yes.
Is how we became friends.
Ah.
And then just kept hanging out after college. He moved to LA. I did internships in LA, so we hung out a bit when I was in town for I think about a year or so. And then, during the pandemic, we were both doing a lot more streaming, and I had been doing it longer. So he would first of all, he was like, "What, you're doing this? Okay, cool." And so we'd be trading some information and stuff. And then we gradually decided to make a podcast ourselves because I watch a ton of scary movies. We both play a lot of scary games. We both love Resident Evil in particular. So it just made sense to do a podcast about horror movies. So we trade off, I'll pick one and he'll pick one, kind of every other week, and then we'll host it.
My goodness.
Yeah.
What an origin story for you two. And I mean, there's so much I want to touch on. First of which, the podcast you're referring to is Scary Basement.
Yeah.
Would you give us a little pitch, elevator pitch on what Scary Basement is? Because it's a podcast that people, I mean, it's a part of the network as well. So if you're a fan of the network or a patron, you get this in your feed. But what is Scary Basement?
So Scary Basement is basically me and Mikey are trapped in a scary basement where every scary thing that has ever existed ever exists. And we're forced to review a movie by whatever monster seems to be in control at that point. For years it was the Demon Bot who would just kind of come up with a movie and force us to watch. But right now in season 2, it is the Pig Bot who he's a big scary monster, but is too scared to watch horror movies. So we watch horror movies and then tell him about it, essentially.
That's so not unintentionally, but that's so wholesome, maybe unexpectedly. That's so great. Funny that you bring this up because I am one of those people that kind of like how I in my heart of hearts, I love the idea of playing RPGs, specifically JRPGs, all the time. I love the idea of that. It's a style and genre of game that I do really enjoy, but only have the space for one, maybe two in a year.
Understandable.
Similar to that, so this is a long road to be I feel the same way about scary movies. I love the idea of scary movies. When I watch one, I'm scared, I'm entertained, I soak it in, but I don't watch many. Like last year,
okay.
Of course, we're in when this podcast come out, it's going to be early November, but for the purposes for us, if Christmas can encroach on Halloween, I think Halloween can encroach on Thanksgiving. So
yeah, I agree. Halloween all the time, please.
Yeah. So we're not tired
for
of it.
Longer Halloween.
Last year I watched one scary movie all season. I watched by myself on a I think it was that a Friday or Saturday night. I watched Barbarian.
Oh shit. Okay. Yeah, that movie is a trip.
I loved it. It was one of my favorite movies of the entire year, truly in my top 3 last year. And it scared the crap out of me, but I was so locked in. That was what I did last year. This year, my girlfriend Amanda and I watched the original Friday the 13th. Yeah, maybe a week and a half ago. You familiar with this one?
Yeah, we did an episode about the original one. I think that's the only Friday the 13th we've done. Oh no, we did the Jason Goes to Hell, which is technically one of those as well.
Oh, nice.
But yeah, the original one is weird because Jason isn't even in it.
I had no idea. In fact, at the beginning of the movie, when we're starting it, because we wanted to watch. I wanted to watch a scary movie. She was being very kind and allowing that. She does not like that sort of
Oh,
thing.
she doesn't. Okay.
So we picked a safe one. It was like, let's pick a movie made in 1980 that
Yeah, and like Kevin Bacon is in that as like a
yes,
teenager, which is like a weird thing.
yes. I'll say not a great movie. But I did enjoy watching it. And
There's some weird performances in that too.
very strange. And at the beginning of it, because I honestly, this is how unfamiliar I am with like scary movie franchises. I was like, I'm pretty sure this is the one with Michael Myers in it. And that is not the case, as you know. Anyway, all that being said is I watched my second scary movie of the season last night by myself. I
Congratulations.
watched, thank you, for the first time, Cabin in the Woods, which
Ooh.
actually, having seen it now, is a bit, there's an aspect of it that's a bit reminiscent of the premise of Scary Basement.
Yes, yeah, definitely. It's like a very meta horror movie. It has like
Yes.
comedy layered into it. In a way that like it doesn't feel as scary kind of until like it starts
Yes.
going off the rails, because there is like a system set up where like
Yes.
yeah, they have to make like yearly sacrifices to like horror deities or whatever.
Yes.
And there
Yeah.
is a scary basement with a bunch of scary things that the kids can choose from, and that kicks off whatever scare they got.
Yes. So I think I had just like forgotten that specific aspect about Scary Basement, that you sort of have all of the scaries at your disposal or like in this basement. And I'm like, oh, that, I mean, I saw this movie last night. It's top of mind.
Yeah.
Anyway, sorry that was a lot of rambling.
Oh no, it's okay. I could talk about horror movies forever. So
Yes. I hope to at least watch one more this season. So 3, I feel like if I get 3, and that is progress for me in watching scary movies.
heck yeah.
But I want to get back to you a little bit. We obviously know each other through Mikey. You're a Patreon contributor on this network, so people who are patrons, they hear you on, of course, Scary Basement, the monthly scary video game podcast, Press X to Scream, as well. Which you just did an episode on the original Resident Evil.
Yeah, which I can't believe we hadn't done that before.
Yeah.
So that one was really fun.
I'm so glad. We're gonna be doing one on Alan Wake, which if you're watching the video version, you can see my Xbox 360 disc case for pretty soon. You're all over the network. But what do you want to tell the listener about yourself? You're obviously a streamer and an artist. Feel free to tell us about Roxy.
Okay. Yeah, I've been an artist since like I was a kid, drawing comics and stuff. That's originally why I went to art school, to
Oh, cool.
make comics. And this was like I went to MCAD, which is the Minneapolis College of Art and Design, which at the time was like one of 2 schools maybe that offered a degree in comic art.
Wow.
Which like there's a lot more now apparently. And the other one was like in Savannah, Georgia, which I was coming from Alaska, so Minneapolis was a little closer than Savannah, Georgia was.
Yeah, that's amazing. I didn't know that. I was in Savannah earlier this year. And like I would okay, well, I mean, you can go to a city and not know they have a thing, but I'm pleasantly surprised to hear that. But you obviously
Yeah.
were in Minneapolis.
Yeah, which very different weather, that's for sure. And it's funny because I live in Portland now, and I did an internship in an artist collective here who I'm friends with a bunch of them, and basically any of them that went to an art school who wasn't like self-taught, they went to the Savannah College of Art and Design. Which I was like, man, I would have run into some of these people that I know now probably if I had gone there.
Yeah.
But yeah, so went to art school, did a bunch of internships for a bunch of different companies, including the ones like in LA, which is how like me and Mikey reconnected a little bit.
Yeah.
Worked at Dark Horse Comics for a couple years as a editor, working on a lot of books, a lot of video game art books while I was there in particular, which was very fun.
Very cool.
Yeah. Joined a startup that lasted for about a year. Startups are kind of a roll of the dice. Who knows how it's gonna go?
Yeah.
Lasted like about a year. It's not too bad. Then after that, I've been basically full-time freelance and started streaming. Started like working conventions and doing more merch art and stuff that have been super fun. And yeah, got a webcomic too. I've got like 2 webcomics. I got a Patreon only like novel that I'm working on, and a million podcasts with you and other folks on the network now.
Yeah. Dang, you really got like have a lot that you have going on right now,
Yeah.
and in multiple mediums and stuff. That's really cool.
Yeah, it's really fun. I think I just like multitasking, and there's so many things I want to do. Like there's just not enough time in the day. So
Yes,
sometimes I can overload it a little bit, but I really enjoy being able to work on a bunch of different things.
totally. That's cool. I'm sure that I'm doing a little assuming, but is the variety something that is refreshing to have?
I think so, yeah, because like if I get sort of burnt out on one project, I can kind of shift to invest more time in another one for a bit, and kind of like bounce off of each other in that way.
Okay,
Especially
cool.
because like one of them is basically mostly all writing. I'll do like illustrations for different chapters, but otherwise it's mostly all writing. And then the other one is mostly all art because I've done all of the writing for the comic and planning beforehand. So it's just sitting down and doing the dang thing,
Dang,
which is fun and rewarding, but can get to be a little much if that's all you're doing.
I bet. Yeah. Well, Roxy, thank you so much for sharing about yourself. It's so funny. Like a lot of that I've like come to know from our like quick conversations, like between podcasts and stuff over the last couple years, but it's still always fun to like learn a little bit more about somebody.
Yeah.
So before we get into your general history with video games, will you please introduce the game you've brought on today and call me by your game?
So I have brought the critically acclaimed MMORPG Final Fantasy XIV to you today, Connor,
I
which is a
cannot
game
go
that's been
ahead.
going
Sorry.
on. No, sorry, it's a game that's been going on for like more than 10 years. It's a huge game. And yeah, I love it. It's my favorite game. I'm excited to talk to you about it.
I'm very excited too. This is a game that I know you and many, many other people have a lot of passion for. So this is awesome that we're getting to discuss it on this podcast. It's come up like a little bit in people's general sections, but I'm so pumped to have you on specifically to talk about this one.
Hey.
So we'll get into that in the main event in the second half of the show. But let's get into your general history with video games. Do you remember like the earlier or earliest interest that you took in video games?
Um, so me and my brother got a PlayStation 1 for Christmas. I think my brother had been playing it at friends' houses or something. So our parents got PS1 for us one year. It came with Crash Bandicoot and Frogger, like
Wow.
PS1 Frogger.
A couple of
Uh
classic pairs.
yeah, and like so the Frogger game had co-op stuff to it. So like that Frogger game was probably the first co-op game I ever played. And then yeah, Crash Bandicoot for the PS1 was like my introduction to platformers, I guess.
Yes.
And then shortly thereafter we got like Tekken 3, which was my first fighting game. And then eventually another friend had Final Fantasy VIII, and
Ooh.
like that triggered my knowledge and love affair with JRPGs that has
Whoa.
continued to exist into the rest of my life now as an
Ooh.
adult.
I'd love to ask you about that a little bit.
Yeah.
So you said a friend had a copy. Where did it go from there? Was it something that you would play at their house? Did you get your own at some point?
Yeah, I had to save up my allowance to get a copy. So I think I played at her house a little bit. And then God, I remember it was early days of the internet. I thought I could download a PC copy of it.
Oh yeah.
And like on our crappy, like horrible dial-up internet, I like had the computer running like in secret for like days for it to download. And then when it finally did, like it didn't work or I didn't know how to make it work. So I was like, oh man, guess I just got to keep saving up my pocket money.
No. Oh man.
But I did and eventually bought it for myself. And yeah, I think that was the first video game I ever bought, actually. It was
Wow.
Final Fantasy VIII. And I think by that point we had gotten the Nintendo 64 and my brother was kind of like he was on that system. So I got
Okay.
to like kind of co-op the PlayStation 1 for myself, which became like my RPG machine.
That's amazing.
Every day after school until I beat it.
Yes.
Hundreds of hours, man.
Goodness. For 8 specifically, or just like all sorts?
Particularly 8, but that
Yeah.
like dominoed me into like Chrono Cross, Legend of Dragoon, Final Fantasy VII was already out by that point.
Mhm.
And God, a bunch of other games. I guess Grandia. No, Grandia. I played Grandia 2 first. That was PlayStation 2. But yeah, I think Persona. Yeah,
Wow.
I played Persona 2 on that as well, which I still have
Gosh.
that copy too.
No way.
And then yeah, like Final Fantasy IX came out and everything. Parasite Eve. God, I love Parasite Eve. I could have picked that for
Oh,
today's
that's got
episode
to be
too.
like right up your alley too. It's like a
Yeah.
horror RP, like JRPG
Yeah,
sort of.
it is. There's so few of them, but like the few that exist are some of my favorite games. And
Have you
it's
guys
also a
done
Squaresoft title.
have you done that for Press X to Scream?
No, we should though, and like whoever's listening to this, we don't have to do this, but since it takes place on like Christmas and Christmas Eve, I was suggesting we could do that for December, but I know it is like a longer game
I
to ask
mean,
you guys to play,
we could
but
at least, I bet Jeremy would be down for this.
okay.
We could at least like play what we can and give like our impressions of what we did for that, if you were interested.
Yeah, yeah. And I mean like that's probably a discussion for a different time, but
Yeah,
yeah,
totally.
it's just weird how that one does take place on Christmas.
Yeah.
Very strangely. But yeah, PlayStation 1 was my RPG machine and what like introduced me to it. And the friend who introduced me to it is actually my childhood best friend who is still my friend to this day.
Oh,
She doesn't really play video games anymore. Sometimes we do on like every other Saturday. But which is actually kind of leading into how I got into Final Fantasy XIV to begin with.
oh, really?
Which I don't know if that's the time I could go into it
Let's
here.
let's thank you for asking. Let's save it for the main event later.
Okay. Gotcha.
But
A little bit of a
it is
preamble then.
exactly a little tease. I am so happy to hear that like not only was the PlayStation 1 your first console, but like it immediately kicked off that like love for you
Yeah.
for like games and RPGs in general. Where did you go after the PS1? Did you get a PS2? Like what was your journey like?
Yes. So the PS2 was like the first one that was all my
Yeah.
system. So yeah, and that the library that the PlayStation 2 has is even like bigger. And of course, like graphics were better. And then you can play your PlayStation 1 games on it. So like I could still go back and play all those. Um and
What
like
a
Final Fantasy X, I think, was the first RPG I ever played that had voice acting.
Oh wow. Yeah.
I mean, Legend of Dragoon had it here and there, but it was not the same.
Yeah, totally. And I
Uh
love FF10. Like that's the only like proper Final Fantasy I've ever finished. Uh
okay.
I love like I mean I'm talking about myself here, but I love Final Fantasy 4 or 2 here. 6 or 3 here. 7 I've played to like the big twist in the game.
Ooh,
Uh
okay.
6 like I think I've maybe mentioned to you before, I've played into the World of Ruin at least 3 times and then I've stopped. It's 7 remake though I did finish remake and I'm really excited for Rebirth.
Okay, yeah, you're ahead of me, and that's a big gaming sin that I haven't played Resident Evil, Final Fantasy 7 remake.
Hey, there's too many games out there. But dang, so the PS2 like really continued that love affair for you. What are there any other titles on like that system that were meaningful that you'd like to shout out?
Oh God. Shadow Hearts 1 and 2, those are horror JRPGs as well.
Wow.
They're some of my favorite games of all time. They're so cool. The first game actually, like Shadow Hearts 1 came out, I think, in the same month as Final Fantasy X. So
Mhm.
it got like completely buried. Like
Oh
I
my
think it would have
goodness.
been much less of a cult hit and more of like an overt hit if it hadn't come out when it did.
Yeah.
Um, and then the Xenosaga series is just crazy, like crazy sci-fi saga. I don't even know how to describe it. It is called Xenosaga for a reason, I guess.
Yeah.
That had like 3 games that I remember playing. The first one like in high school, and then the final one came out when I was like in college. So I remember being in my college dorm like it's trying to beat it.
Oh my gosh. Amazing.
And yeah, like Grandia 2 that I mentioned before earlier too.
Yeah.
That was a game that like I rented from Blockbuster until I basically beat it, super close to it. And then by that time, when I was towards the end, I had enough money to buy it with my allowance. So then I finally owned a copy. But
Oh, that's so great. Oh,
yeah.
wow. I love that. I've got some more questions I want to ask you. The first of which is a question I like to ask people who have been gaming as long as we have.
Mhm.
What is the time in your life where gaming has taken the most backseat? Or like I like to refer to this as like a dark period where you're
Hmm.
playing the least games you've ever played or taking a break entirely.
Yeah, I guess it was probably when I was interning, and specifically when I was in LA, because I, was just crashing at a family friend's place. They were kind enough to let me borrow their car because, like, if I hadn't had a
Huge.
car to borrow in LA, I don't even know how I would have done anything.
Yeah.
It's impossible, especially because, like,
Gosh.
they lived in Glendale.
Oh,
So I was having
really?
to commute to Hollywood for where my internship spot was at Archaea, which is a company that eventually merged with Boom,
Huh.
who was a different comics company, literally while I was
Oh my,
interning there.
what a
It was
mess.
really
Wow.
weird. Like, we came in one day and they were like all crowded around like the president of the company, who I'd never seen before. Like, he finally showed up once. And they were like, "So we're moving." I was like, "What? Okay." But yeah, since I didn't have like a system or anything, I didn't game for like months and months while I was there, until I eventually bought the Nintendo 3DS for Fire Emblem
Mm.
Awakening, which is another
Oh,
RPG.
yes.
And so, like, I basically just had that game, and then I think Mikey let me borrow his PlayStation 3 for like a week with the intention to play Last of Us, and I didn't have the time to play it and just gave it back
Oh
uh
man.
so yeah, very very busy time in my life
Yes.
during that.
What year would this have been that you would have been out here?
Oh man, I should know. I am so bad with like keeping track of time.
Well, it was
Started working for Dark Horse
PS3,
right after that, so like, yeah, it was PS3 era.
and if it was The Last of Us, we're at least talking like it's back half of 2013, if not maybe the next year,
Yeah,
2014.
yeah,
Uh,
so probably around there.
Interesting. That's like the year that I moved here was like 2013, June.
Oh wow, when did you
Yeah.
and Mikey meet? Did you know him
We
back then?
I didn't. Well, I met Mikey through Jeremy, and
Okay.
I actually like remember them. I wonder if I talk about this on Mikey's episode, because I remember the moment I met Mikey. I was
Mm-hmm.
like, I already knew Jeremy because we were like doing sketch comedy together.
Okay.
An old friend of ours had like got this little sketch comedy group together that I knew him, this other person, through improv. And long story short is that I knew Jeremy already. This is before all the video game stuff, but I remember crossing the street to the improv theater that we studied at,
Mm-hmm.
and with Jeremy, and he introduced me to Mikey, who like is exactly how he today appears to me exactly how he was in that moment. He is like wearing a hat, had a t-shirt, I mean, which is not unusual, had his backpack on. It was like exactly the same person. So anyway, I didn't meet, so I think that's like 2016, 2017 or so.
Okay,
Yeah, I
gotcha.
want to say 17, but
I want to know if like sliding doors, like, could we have met maybe back when I was
gosh,
there?
I think it's unlikely, but like I was
Yeah,
here, so like there's a chance that we crossed paths or like went to the
yeah.
same restaurant. I'm always far too interested in that in that stuff. Um, so that's awesome. I like that. That gives me a little even more of like a window into like that time in your life.
Mm.
So one other question I want to ask you, and no worries if there's not a good answer. Is there a game that you think of that you wouldn't have expected to connect with or really enjoy that ended up surprising you?
Hmm. Fallout 4, probably.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, that's a game that like other people who have played other Fallouts, like whenever I say that I like Fallout 4, they're like, "Ooh, that one?" And I'm
Yeah,
like,
I've heard
"What?
that
What's
too.
wrong with it? I like it. Shut up." So I think like because I was able to play it without any preconceived notions going into it, I really enjoyed it. But like I had never played a single Fallout game before
Oh,
that.
yeah.
And I think it was like after I had played BioWare RPGs, I was just like starving for something similar.
Yes.
And like Fallout 4 kind of is like there's companions that you can talk to or befriend or kill or romance. There's like an overarching story that you can like impact in different ways. So I was
Hmm.
like, okay, this is kind of like that. Sure, I'll try it. But then I was surprised at how much I got into just like exploring the open world, finding every note, which like it's a huge ass game.
Yeah.
Uh the building aspect, I was like, I hate crafting and building things. I'll never do this. And then like cut to a year later, I'm like listening to hours of podcasts while I'm building like a crazy sky tree thing. Um, So yeah, that game like absorbed my life in a way I never would have expected. And I kind of assumed, I was like, I'll probably just bounce off of this.
Yeah.
Right. Because like I kind of bounced off of Skyrim. I know that probably seems like a sin for everybody out there who's ever played Skyrim. I liked it enough, but it didn't like really connect with me.
Sure.
So I don't know what it was about post-apocalyptic Boston that just
Yeah.
got me, but it did.
Interesting. Yeah, so my first Bethesda RPG was Skyrim, which I do like love and love my memories of that game. And I will be reporting you to the Office of Sin for what you've said. No, I don't.
Oh shit.
I literally couldn't care less. People can connect with what they connect with. But I also didn't expect to like love Fallout 3 so much. I gave that a shot around this time last year. I played maybe 20, 25 hours and
Recently. Okay.
yeah. And because it's on Game Pass, so I was like, I'm in
It's
the
for
mood for
free
something
then.
like this. Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. So I gave it a shot and kind of like you, I was like, I didn't realize that I would think the post-apocalypse would be like
An
something that's
escape.
interesting to
Yeah.
me.
Like
Yeah, it
this is
was
fun escapism. This is a fun game.
yeah, and that one's in like the Washington DC area, but
Yeah.
I was like, wow, I still prefer Skyrim, but I like the setting of that one. I thought it was way more interesting to me.
Hmm.
Uh,
I feel like if you
okay,
have knowledge of those places too, like I have no knowledge of Boston or DC
yes,
or like Las Vegas, but it's got to be like so much cooler if you do.
I think I think there's definitely something to that. I went to that area when I was 18 years old, so I mean, as of when this episode comes out, nearly, well, I guess 14 years ago or so,
Okay.
was there for a week. Don't remember it that well, but like there's still enough like monuments that are like notable that you have familiarity with that I think are
Hmm.
interesting. So I think there's something to what you were saying. Okay. So I would love to know. I got just a few more questions I want to ask you
Yeah,
about your
sure.
general history with gaming. Really just two. And first of which is there a game that's coming out or that's on the horizon, whether it's a new release or something you have been holding in your back catalog that you're excited to play?
Like one that I own or one that I'm like coveting that I don't have yet.
Either way, it could be one that like is sitting on your shelf or one that's coming out next year, whatever you'd like.
Well, I guess I don't have a PlayStation 5 right now. And my computer is not super powerful.
Yeah.
For years I've been like laptop focused because I've needed to be able to take my work with me since I'm
Mm-hmm.
a digital artist. So I never really had like a super powerful like gaming PC or anything. So I can't play Final Fantasy 16 right now, and I can't play Baldur's Gate 3 right now, which feel like they
Oh.
were specifically designed just for me. So I'm looking at those from a distance. I'm planning to get like a desktop PC that can actually run stuff at some point.
Mm.
And they just announced like the new PS5, but I was hoping for like a PS5 Pro, like something with better tech, but instead it's just like exact same tech packaged a little bit smaller. It's like a PS5 Slim. So
Yeah.
it's like, I guess I might as well just get one of those. I was holding out to hope there'd be like a new, more powerful version, but I don't know if we're going to be getting that for who knows how long now.
Yeah. That, I mean, I don't need to go on about that, but the whole situation is perplexing to me. I don't know why you would do a console like a mid-generation sort of if they're considering this mid-generation. I mean, I guess the PS5 is going to be 3 years old in
Yeah,
a
which
couple
is
weeks.
crazy. I feel like the pandemic, and I'm just bad at keeping track of time in general, but
Yeah,
the pandemic has messed with it even more, where it's like, oh yeah, that was 3 years ago, wasn't it?
yeah. It
Feels
all
like it just came out yesterday.
like don't get me wrong. Before like when years would pass, I find it easy to like think of years of like it's easy for me to sort of what am I trying to say, even say here to distinguish like oh this was this year when this was going on for me, this was this one, and even though my life has changed in the last 3 years and I'm doing stuff that I wasn't doing before, it totally runs together the last three.
Hmm.
So yeah, it's just the console refresh for them is so confusing. The
Yeah, I don't
digital
know
version
why.
is now $50 more expensive than it used to be.
Yeah, and like you have to buy an additional add-on for it to now run discs. And it's like, why would
Yeah.
you even? I don't even understand why anybody wants that digital version. I'm a physical media forever type of person.
Oh, we're in the same boat then.
Yeah,
Yeah.
good.
Yeah, but I know, I mean, so many people who are like yeah, I don't buy like physical games. I'm like, well, we're different, I guess.
Yeah.
I'm just very afraid. I'm deathly afraid. I'm constantly fearful of when every one of these storefronts is like, actually, we're going away and you can't re-download your game and it's bye-bye. I
Exactly.
like,
That is my fear. Like,
yeah,
yeah, the things you bought, you can't play anymore. You don't own them. We don't care about preserving the games.
yeah, it's too much. The last question that I have for you in this segment, is there another game, or could be two, even if you'd like, from your history of games that you haven't gotten to mention yet, that you're like, oh, this was another meaningful one for me, whether it be like from the moment or just like the game itself?
Hmm. Man. I feel like I should have a better answer for this. I feel like my brain is so jammed thinking of like every game I own now.
It's
Um,
tough, and I am putting you on the spot.
yeah. I mean, I guess kind of Resident Evil 2 remake maybe.
Ooh,
Because like Resident Evil 6 had kind of disillusioned me. Like I used to really love Resident Evil as a kid growing up, especially like Resident Evil 4 was my jam.
mm,
Um, but like they kept going progressively more towards like action. Like
yes,
Resident Evil 5 was kind of more, if you can even call it like scary, it was more like things running at you fast kind of scary
yeah.
instead of like any sort of mood setting. And like the big draw of that was just being able to play with your friend with co-op. But like Resident Evil 6 was so buggy and felt like they didn't know what they were doing. None of the characters feel like themselves anymore. It was just like I was like, okay, I guess I don't really care about this anymore.
Yeah, can I ask you about 6? Because
Uh-huh.
5 I'm familiar with. 5 is the one that's like set in Africa, right?
Yeah. With
What
the
is the
Sheva and Chris.
Yeah, what's the setting for 6? I actually like I this is something I could just look up, but since you're here.
I mean, it's so hard to kind of describe it because they're sort of trying to make it like a globe-trotting adventure to
Oh,
an extent, and then you've got three sets of two characters in completely different places. So like Leon and Helena, who is his nothing partner, who's introduced in that game, they're like in Washington, D.C. It starts with like the president being infected as a zombie, and Leon has to shoot him, and he's like, I'm sorry, Mr.
oh
President, and
my
shoots
God,
him.
that's hilarious.
Which is very funny, even though I think they want us to take it seriously.
Yeah.
And then you've got like Wesker's son and Sherry Birkin, who were like, I think somewhere in like Middle Eastern Europe or
Uh-huh.
something. And then you've got Chris and Piers, who is like his subordinate kid. And I don't know where they are. Maybe they're somewhere in
Sure.
China or something. But
Huh.
like the game takes you all over and kind of doesn't know what it wants to be. Ada's
That
running
sounds
around
like
doing
it.
who knows what. She's like a chrysalis creature. I don't know. There's a clone, something.
Weird.
It like went
Like,
completely off the rails. Me and
yeah.
Mikey did a stream for it. Just because the only way to play that game is co-op, so you're playing it with a friend, so you're not suffering alone. And then two, just
Okay.
like uneasy because the game is so buggy and just like bad. It's not worth your time to have bullet sponges, which aren't actually challenges or
Sure.
anything. So like you can get through it, demolish it that way. It can be you can make your own fun out of it, and like Sherry and Wesker. I can't believe I'm forgetting his name right now. Whatever, Wesker Jr. Their story is actually sort of interesting. They actually have like some degree of like chemistry or something, and it's like seeing Sherry grown up was kind of neat. And then this new character who is related to Wesker somehow was like a weird choice, but he can punch things and kick things, which is
Huh.
kind of fun because you couldn't really do that before,
Hmm.
aside from like quick time events or something with Chris.
Yeah.
But yeah, anyway, that game is all over the world on
Yeah.
purpose and it's
It,
very chaotic.
it's like I'm so sorry to get you so off track of RE2 remake, but even someone like me who before playing RE2 remake, I'd only ever played maybe like 2 or 3 hours of 7, which I liked. I just kind of fell off.
Uh-huh. Seven's
I
very
can
different.
say it again. Sorry.
7 is just like very different because like a return to actually horror and it's first person, which I don't like, but like I
Yeah.
get why they did it.
Yeah, totally. I all that to say is that the Resident Evils are pretty distinct to me of like what's going on and where like who even like vaguely who the main characters are. So
Mhm.
you were saying all that to talk about RE2, and I think because like the franchise had gone astray, but where were you headed with that?
Yeah, sorry. What was like the original question for why I
Oh,
even said that?
it was just like I was asking, what's another meaningful game from your history that you like have to mention on this episode?
Oh, okay. Yeah, so like I went into that game being like, I'll give it a shot. Like Resident Evil kind of broke my heart a while ago, but this looks cool. And even though I didn't really like the gameplay of 7, I appreciate them doing something different. It seems like they're trying different things.
Yeah.
So I tried it and now it's like one of my favorite games of all time. It's so good, so well done. They really nailed like how to remake that game with a modern perspective, but also like they didn't make it first person, so it's third person, which like the original game was, kind of top down
Mm-hmm.
tank controls. So it's a little bit different in that respect. But it was like scary when it needed to be. You have like a good sense of progression, and like we're doing an entire podcast series about
Yeah.
it pretty soon, so I'll be able to like yak your ear off about it even more. But like uh that game reignited my love of the franchise. I went back and like played all of the old ones again on
Wow.
stream. I started making like a bunch of fan merch art and
Yeah.
stuff, and some of my favorite stuff I've ever made,
Oh,
like the
that's when
pin series and
that
stuff.
kicked off you doing that?
Yeah, like Resident Evil 2
Oh.
remake was the one that kicked off my love for the series again. And then it made me like dig into all the other like Resident Evil like games I could find and stuff. So I played like a bunch of those on stream. Some were hit and miss. Some were really cool. So it just kind of like gave me a new deep dive into horror games in that franchise in particular that yeah, like I'm so glad it exists. I'm so glad it set me on that path. Like I don't think me and Mikey would have made a podcast together if I hadn't
Yeah.
gotten back into that.
Oh, that's so cool. And that makes me, like you were kind of getting to, even more excited to hear you talk about on this series. Like, I can't express enough how hooked I was Sunday and Monday playing through it and just like blew through the homework. Thankfully, it really wasn't that much for our first 2 episodes, but
Yeah. It has a good sense of progression and feeling like you are
oh man,
mastering the area and like clearing it.
yes.
Which
Oh,
it's so satisfying.
I just wanted to keep playing it, and I had to put it down because like we were saying yesterday, I don't want to forget what
Uh-huh.
comes next. Anyway, Roxy, thank you so much for sharing about, like a brief synopsis of your history with video games in general.
Hmm.
Yeah, that was a blast hearing from you. Thanks so much.
Yay. It was
Um,
fun.
we're going to take a quick break, and then when we come back, we'll get into the main event and hear about you from all things Final Fantasy XIV. So I'll see you on the other side.
All right.
Welcome back to Call Me by Your Game. This is your host, Connor McCabe, here with the great Roxy Polk. Roxy, welcome back.
Thank you for welcoming me back. I'm glad to be here still.
Hey, here we are. I'm so excited. Here we are at the main event. We are, of course, going to be discussing Final Fantasy XIV. And by discussing, I mean more me hearing from you about the game. But that's why I have people on. So, like I told you before the show, I'm going to go through some brief history and context about the game. And if there's anything that you feel like would be important or helpful to add on for the listener, context-wise, green light.
Okay. Cool.
Awesome. Otherwise, here I go. Final Fantasy XIV is an MMORPG developed and published by Square Enix. It was directed and produced by they call him Yoshi P, but his name is Naoki Yoshida. Where does the P? I'm already going to deviate. Do you know where the P comes from in Yoshi P?
Um,
Is it like Yoshi Prime or something like
I
that?
actually don't. I think because he's the producer, so it might be
Okay,
Yoshi in terms of that.
that you know what? Hey, I'm going to go ahead
That's
and
my
say
best
that's what it
guess.
is.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I should know that. Whoops.
Hey, no one's grading you, so we're all good. This game was released worldwide for the PS3 and Windows in August 2013, and it replaced the failed 2010 version with subsequent support for PlayStation 4 OS X, PS5, and Xbox Series X and S that came in the future. Final Fantasy XIV is set in the fantasy region of, would you pronounce this region's name for me?
Eorzea.
Eorzea. That actually wasn't too hard. I could have done that. But thank you. This takes place 5 years after the devastating Seventh Umbral Calamity, which ended the original version of the game. In the calamity, the elder primal Bahamut escaped from his prison, an ancient space station called the Dalamud, unleashing an apocalypse across Eorzea. Through temporal magic, the player character of the original version escaped, reappearing at the start of A Realm Reborn. As Eorzea cements its recovery, the player must fend off a reignited invasion from the Garlean Empire. All that being said, is that the original release of this game was a massive failure, and this was them basically pressing the reset button. Was it correct?
Yes, correct. It was such a disaster. And this is something I should have sent to you beforehand, and anybody listening, I highly recommend you go watch the 3-part no clip documentary, because they go into like why that game failed and why it like just didn't work on like a fundamental level of just like coding and shit. Like it wouldn't run. Among other things, and how like Yoshi P came in and saved it essentially. And they made a way to like rework it in narratively to destroy like the first version of the game without like, you know, discounting that it existed. So like folks who have been playing the first part of the game and stuff, it's like, your play experience was still valid. We care about you. Please join us for the next part. And we're just going to kind of start over, and most characters just like forgot or something. So don't worry about it.
Yeah, I bet the documentary gets into it, but I would be curious to hear from the team what prompted them to give it another shot, as opposed to being like, hey, we're going to cut our losses here, and this game we're going to ride it out, and that's it.
Yeah, I think I've watched the documentary twice, but it's been a bit. I think they were literally at a crossroads where they were like, this game is so bad, and it's like a mainline game in the franchise, it's damaging the franchise name. If we don't like course correct this, then just like Final Fantasy as a brand is kind of screwed. So it was kind of like a Hail Mary that luckily turned out. But
yes,
I wonder if in an alternate world, if it hadn't, if we'd still get Final Fantasy 14 and 16 and stuff at this point.
Yeah, that's a great question. Anyway, getting into like just a few more details. Let's see. The relaunched version of the game released to largely positive reception. Critics praised its solid mechanics and progression, and commended Yoshida for an unexpected recovery. Truly like an amazing feat of not just making it work, but bringing the game back, and it being like one of the most popular and successful MMORPGs ever made at this point.
Yeah, I think a big part of why it works too is that Yoshi P is like an actual player. Like he plays the game and cares about playing the game, so he notices things that like someone who, you know, is in a boardroom or something, who isn't playing the game, just looking at numbers for sales or something, like wouldn't understand. And he like listens to his team in a way that, like, at least the documentary led me to believe, just like in a very kind way, but also like, you know, making decisions where he needed to. And making sure people were heard. And like he listens to, like, if someone's telling him, oh, this doesn't work, he's like, oh, okay, I see what you're talking about. Okay, cool. Let's do this to fix it. So like he's actually thinking of ways to fix it. And because it's been going on for like 10 years, that is like continued to this day, where like they're listening to feedback and improving things. And they've even gone back to older expansions at this point and like added extra stuff. So
really?
New players who are being onboarded are getting like a much more improved experience. Like they care about onboarding new folks as much as they do people who have been playing the game forever and are like, you know, super hardcore raiders or something.
Yeah, that's cool. And like absolutely amazing. You had touched on the like expansions, and I'll go ahead and just go through the different ones, just like honestly bullet points of like what they've done. They've had 5 of these. 5 major expansions at least. In 2015, there was Heavensward. 2017 was Stormblood. 2019, Shadowbringers. 2021, there was Endwalker. And to come in 2024, Dawn Trail.
Yeah, they released the trailer for that a couple months ago at a fan fest in Las Vegas.
Ooh.
And it's like you've been going through this long journey up to Endwalker. You can kind of assume end, huh? That sounds pretty final. So it does kind of like wrap up the saga that it had been building towards for like years and years. So this new expansion is like, hey, it's summer vacation time. Let's go have fun in a tropical adventure that you've never been to this part of the world before. And there's going to be like some sort of fighting tournament or something. And they literally have been like marketing it or calling it like, yeah, it's your summer vacation.
That's so cool.
After like all of the hardship and work and effort and everything that you did leading up to it.
Yeah, that's fun. Even like the name, like the name's interesting. Dawn Trail, like you were talking about Endwalker. It's like maybe they're setting up, a further expansion, like a series of expansions with the word, dawn as in like the beginning, but like it also could just be like, oh, the dawn of like your rest or whatever.
Yeah, they're kind of going to be doing something different with the story pacing going forward. Like I didn't know this until like folks told me, and I noticed the pattern myself, but basically they have the big expansion and then there's like 5.5 smaller story installments leading up to the next big expansion. And how it went was that the third little update after the big expansion wrapped up the entire update, or the entire expansion. It was kind of like the true ending to it. And then the next two after that set up the next expansion.
Oh, okay.
So it was this thing where you could kind of like, you get the sense of pacing and everything in a very specific way. Every time they did it, it was very different. So it's not like it was boring or something, even though that's kind of like the setup they have.
Okay.
But after Endwalker, they're like, we're not doing it that way now. We're gonna kind of experiment with our pacing and how we're doing things.
Oh, cool.
So like the current updates they have right now are based on like Final Fantasy IV.
Yes.
So like
awesome.
you're fighting Golbez on the moon and stuff.
What more could you want?
Yeah, right. And the newest one just came out a couple weeks ago. I haven't played it yet because basically when it comes out, I wait a couple weeks for other folks to play it and then I play it on stream. So it's not like spoilers for people who haven't played yet. But they're gearing up for the next expansion. I have no idea how they're going to be setting it up at all.
Yeah,
because it seems like a lot of crazy shit's going down.
Totally. Interesting. So one thing that I've noticed in like this table setting that we've been doing is that there aren't a ton of details about like the actual game and what you're doing. I know there's like, you can choose from all sorts of classes in this game. Is there like a brief, like, can you give us like a brief summary of like what it's like to start the game, choose a class, and just like where you set out from, like how you set out to play the game?
Yeah, sure. So there's like 3 main cities that you have the possibility of starting in, and depending on whatever class you pick, that will choose your starting city.
Oh.
So you've got like a desert city, you've got a forest city, and then you've got one that's like on the coast, like with pirates and stuff. And that kind of like determines which of your like main crew of adventurers you kind of run into. So eventually you get like recruited by these folks called the Scions of the Seventh Dawn, who are like, oh yeah, this good guy hero group that like you're used to seeing from other Final Fantasies and stuff. Like each character is very distinct. But you'll be like spending more time with one of those characters leading into that, depending on where your starting city is. And you have a different like starter mission too. So like if you choose 3 different characters who start in 3 different cities, you're going to get like a different intro to the game, which is neat. So it
cool.
like keeps it fresh. But then like whatever race you pick doesn't really impact much, aside from like if you choose to go into first person view and you're playing like one of the little short guys, then you're very short to the ground.
Yeah.
And sometimes characters will comment on them like in story situations, but not really often. And yeah, you get to kind of like just pick whatever you want. There's like flavor text to be like, oh, what's your patron deity? When I started playing, I was like, I have no idea who any of these people are.
Yeah.
Sure, one of them is called like the Wanderer. I'm an adventurer. I guess that's what I'm doing. I'll pick that one. So it's just kind of like a flavor text thing that doesn't really impact. It's just like for you.
Yeah. That's cool.
So there's like some choices that like, yeah, picking your class determines your city, and that will determine actual gameplay difference. But then other things like your race or your patron deity that are just for fun for you, whatever you like, whatever your preference is.
Cool. I also know that this game has, like, of course, a lot in common with, as far as the gameplay and setup, or sorry, like systems, as many MMORPGs. Like, it's going to differ, like, as if you like, it's different than playing World of Warcraft, but there are things in common being of a similar genre. And then, as one could guess, many tie-ins to the Final Fantasy franchise, which of this is a part of as well. So that's like the flavor of the game.
Yeah. So if you played any of the other Final Fantasies, there will be many nods that are like fun little things that if you haven't played any of them, it's fine. It doesn't like detract from your experience. It's not a thing where they're like pointing and yelling and being like, oh yeah, remember that thing?
Yeah.
You sure should remember that thing, right? No, it's just they work it in an organic way. That's pretty neat. But like I have never really gotten into MMOs. I tried World of Warcraft a little bit, bounced off it really hard. Like MMOs have never really been a thing that interested me.
Gotcha.
So like when I started this, I was not expecting to become as obsessed and engrossed with it as I am. It's very different from any other like MMO. And I've heard from longtime players, they say the exact same thing.
Okay,
it is very much like a single player Final Fantasy game in the story content. Like you could play the entire thing by yourself, and with a couple of instances of like having to pair up with people randomly, like through roulette, you could just play the entire thing by yourself, like as a single player Final Fantasy game. So it does not exclude people who just want to get through the story.
Cool.
But it also then very much engages with people who want to be in the MMO aspect, to be able to chat with other players or be able to do the super hard battles later, like the raider content, which I have not even dipped my toe into, even after playing this for like more than 2 years, because I was much more focused on the story. And so many of like the little side quests and stuff, like the writing in this game is so impressive and just keeps getting better and better the longer you get into it. And specifically the expansion Shadowbringers, like I was loving the game, digging it up until that point, but then when I got to that expansion, I was like, oh, this is my favorite game ever now.
Wow. What? Huge.
And like I've played so many games, so it kind of seems crazy, like whenever I tell people that, they're like, what? Okay. Especially because when it starts out like in A Realm Reborn, it can be a little bit dry. It's not bad, but it feels a little bit more like maybe standard, where you're like, why are so many people being like crazy about this game? Like I don't understand.
Yeah.
And it sucks to kind of be able to tell people, because like this is something that I was told too, because I really like Nier Automata, and they did a crossover raid series. And so I had a friend that was like, hey, play Final Fantasy XIV. We got Nier Automata in this game. Like that, right? And I was like, okay, how long does it take me to get there? And they were like,
well,
yeah, that's like in the fourth expansion.
Yeah.
I was like, okay. Yeah, so you mean I have like a big mountain to climb. I can't do that now.
Yes.
But
that's not just turning on the game and getting the Nier content or whatever. Yeah.
You have to get so far into it to do that. Then it's like, I wouldn't be doing it only for that at that point.
Totally.
You gotta like your journey there. Otherwise you're kind of screwed.
Yeah.
But like I could get into, is now the time to like get into like how I even started playing this in the first place?
Pretty much. And all I wanted to say as well is that I was gonna ask if you had played any other MMOs in general. And like you were saying, it sounds like no, you've just bounced off them for the most part.
Yeah, like I played Ragnarok online on like PC, maybe in high school or something. I don't know if Gaia Online counts, not really. And then like World of Warcraft very briefly.
Yeah.
If you can even count it.
It's like kind of like how I love the idea of like of being a big JRPG head. I also love the idea of like having an MMO that I adore. So many of them have been like, ooh, appealing for different reasons. I just like haven't without spoiling anything, haven't gotten into them too much. But I would love to hear how the heck you got into this game in the first place. Was it a recommendation? Was it your Final Fantasy love that led you here? How did it happen?
So I've been like a fan of Final Fantasy forever. Like I was saying earlier, Final Fantasy VIII was my first Final Fantasy and JRPG when I was a kid, like in middle school. But the reason why I started playing this was because I had a group of friends from my hometown who we had been trying to find different games to play together. And like, I had recommended Dead by Daylight, which is a horror game, an asymmetrical horror game. And all of them are kind of like scared of horror stuff, except for me. So I was like, I know this is a hard ask, but I've been playing this and maybe you'll find it fun. So it actually clicked with them. And they actually had fun playing it. I was like, oh, okay. All right, cool. And one of them is my friend who introduced me to Final Fantasy VIII to begin with, my childhood friend. But like that game, the more I played it, the more I got like road rage. Like I had never played a game that has made me so angry before and like cursing out loud, where I was just like, I don't like me when I play this game. I'm actually not having fun, and I got them all into this. So let me try and find a game to replace this that we can all play. And Final Fantasy XIV is free. There's like a meme about, have you heard of the critically acclaimed Final Fantasy XIV MMORPG? Which they actually, as of this new update, added another free expansion to that. So you can play Heavensward and Stormblood for free.
Amazing.
So it's even easier to like advertise for the cult of this game to have people play it. So I was like, okay, that's free. So they could just download it. I don't have to like tell them, hey, let's try a game that you have to like pay $50 for or something. And since it's online and stuff, it would be very easy to like connect with one another. I didn't realize what I was getting into. And I also chose a healer class because I was like, well, if I keep them alive and they only have to worry about hitting things, it'll be much easier for them when they start the game. And since people in my Twitch community had mentioned the game before, I was like, okay, why don't I try streaming it? Because I've never played this before. It might be kind of like fun to get people's takes on it and stuff. And when I started it, like I was not prepared for the amount of menus that like MMOs have in general and that this game has. And compared to other ones, this might even be less than like, I don't know, World of Warcraft. I'm not sure. But so I'm glad I did, because they got to like tell me just how to navigate things. I was like, how do I get to my map? I don't understand. There's too many menus. So I had like veteran folks helping me out to just get kind of like a sense of how it worked in general, which was good. And then, I picked a healer class, which is one of the more complicated classes in the game. Once you get in further, when you're kind of starting out, it's not so bad, but like you don't deal as much damage. So it does make like fighting harder when you're on your own. And then later it's like, the whole party depends on you. If you fuck up, everybody dies, which is something I still haven't gotten quite used to yet.
Oh, the pressure.
I'm much more of a just hit things kind of person. So like I'm much more of like a DPS type of person. But I was like, okay, I'll try healer for them. Got them to download it. They played it for maybe a total of 3 times each before they just bounced off or were like, I don't like this. I was like, oh fuck. Okay, well.
And were you already like, oh, I kind of like this, or getting into it, or were you still just on the fence at this point?
I was kind of on the fence because like the way they delivered the dialogue and the lore, like they're very much trying to be like, hey, we appreciate the game that came before. We appreciate 1.0. Here's some things about it just to let you know we didn't like completely sweep it under the rug, but we're kind of sweeping it under the rug. And like just a lot of like complicated noun or name dropping that I was like, I don't know who these people are or what this thing is. Like it feels like I'm too deep in the weeds already. It was like sort of hard to connect at the beginning. So it was a lot more of just like, hey, it's just sort of fun wandering around and seeing what the world is like. And oh, there's a Moogle. I know what that is. That's cute. And oh, these outfits are kind of neat, or oh, these outfits are kind of atrocious. I need to find a better one. So it was a lot more like pushed by the gameplay in the beginning and just like, the night and day cycles. I remember when I first started really getting into it, playing for like, I don't know how many hours straight without even really realizing it.
The time was cycling.
Both in the real world and in the game. And if you go all the way back to my stream archives between the first time I streamed the game and the second time, like it's obvious that I've been playing the game for like 10 plus hours in between that I hadn't even streamed, like maybe 20 plus. I don't know. And so I was just kind of like invested in the world, and it was like a very comfortable vibe. Like it was very fun. There's a part of me that really adores kind of like grinding stats type stuff, to just be like, oh yeah, all my effort is paying off. I'm getting like a payoff from this. The number goes up. And I picked like a healer class at first, but the great thing about this game is that you can change your class on the fly. From what I know of many other MMOs, you pick that one class and then you're just stuck with that. But this one, you can be every single class in the game. And not only is there combat classes, there's also like crafting. There's an entire huge thing about crafting. And each job quest has like its own storyline that is very expansive and has a complete other cast of characters, where you could, like, you know, if you're role playing in your head, you could think of yourself more as like a carpenter who has just like been tasked to save the world and you are just trying to muddle along.
Yeah, sure.
So it has like a lot of ways for you to get kind of like lost in the world, and I think, like I said before, it feels like very comfortable and like kind of comforting in a way. When you die, it's not all that punishing, you know, it's not like you lose your souls and have to come back or something. You just go back to your home world, and you can like change your warp point to be closer to wherever you're doing things, so it's not even that detrimental if you die. You don't have to go as much backtracking.
Nice.
So yeah, again, because I've been playing Final Fantasy games forever as a kid, and I think the last one I played before this was 15, which is the road trip with the boys in the car.
Yes, of course. That's one I want to play because it seems fun.
Yeah, that was another one that I got into that I was not expecting to, especially because like the development side, if you want to talk about a tragic, muddled development schedule, that game is it's been through the shit.
Wow.
And they like carve pieces of the story out as like a CGI movie and like an anime series, so parts of the story can feel very weird.
Yes.
But just kind of like the moment to moment gameplay of running around with the boys, making comments on like monsters that you're fighting or whatever, and cooking and making a campsite, like it's very fun. That also has kind of like a cozy vibe to it, to an extent.
Just hearing about you getting into like FF14 specifically is so interesting. It's like, I love that you took a flyer on a game to play with this friend group and unintentionally ended up like finding other things about it that were like comforting or cozy or fun. Like a number of different factors that led to that. That's so cool. Was there like a moment when you were like still maybe getting into it that it fully clicked, or that you were like, oh, I'm really enjoying this and like I'm sticking with it for now?
Yeah, so like I kind of touched on a bit about how like the story, when you get into it, for me at least, it was kind of dry at the beginning, and like I understand why it is.
Yeah.
But it sucks because that makes it harder sell for some people, especially folks who are like super story focused like me. But like you get to know the side characters who are part of like your hero group a bit. They're all very different and have like their own history with each other that is kind of neat to figure out. But where it really clicked with me is when you get to this like snowy area, kind of closer to the end of the like original like base game, sort of. And you get embroiled in this mystery with like these religious zealots who are like planting evidence on folks that they like want to get rid of. And there's like this whole mystery behind it where you're like following clues, and then you accidentally inadvertently like delivered some of that false evidence, so you're like, oh shit, I'm like responsible for this person maybe being executed, I gotta stop that. And like meanwhile, every other character, like, or like every other section you've been to in the game has been kind of like, okay, hey adventurer, help me out. But when you get to this place, all of like, or not all of them, but most of like the citizenry like hate you, kind of. They're like exclusionary. They're like, you're an outsider, get out of here. So it felt like suddenly, oh, okay, the world's sort of reacting to me now. Okay, it feels more like, okay, I had a part in this, I want to make it right. These people suck. But then you meet a couple other folks who are like more sane characters who are like, yeah, there's something worse going on here, we really need your help. Like as an outsider, you can do things I can't, because like I'm embroiled in this society, I can't do a thing, so can you please help me out? And suddenly it becomes like kind of a little mini detective story. And expands on like the greater lore of like these dragons and this place that is setting up Heaven's Ward, which is the next big expansion. And all of this, you just came on the trail trying to get like an airship.
And so here like you are like wrapped up in this like mystery.
Yeah, exactly. And so that's when it kind of clicked. I was like, okay, cool. There's more stuff going on here. And the cool thing too is that they've got so many writers because this is such a huge game that the writer who she wrote like most of that section and a bunch of those characters and everything, she became like the main writer of Shadowbringers, which is
Oh,
the
your fave.
expansion, yeah, that got me, and then also Endwalker. And she did a couple of the other job quests, like the Dark Knight job quest that she wrote is
Oh,
still one of
wow.
my favorite ones to this day. It's so cool. She did the ninja one too, which is like very fun and a little more comedic. uh but it was just like cool that I was picking up on like, oh, this is like really cool writing that they're doing here. They're doing something different.
Yeah.
And then seeing that pay off later to be like, oh yeah, she's so cool. I can't believe that like they gave her a whole expansion, which they should have done that earlier.
That's so cool. I'm like, I don't know. There's two writers that are credited with Shadowbringers, that expansion. One is Banri Oda and then Natsuko Ishikawa. I bet it could be Natsuko. I don't
Yeah.
know what gender the name Banri typically is, but anyway, that's so fun. I love that it stuck for you. And that also sounds like I'm not surprised. That sounds like a very intriguing and fun moment in the game to like
Yeah,
hook you.
it was.
I so for you, well, I'd love to know. And of course, it sounds like it could have changed throughout the years, but like what class did you start at? I mean, you said healer.
Mhm.
Have you stayed a healer? Are you rocking a different class currently?
Yeah, actually, so if you've been following me for a couple of years, you would have seen this change. But if you're following me now, like my username on everything now is Red Mage Roxy because I fell in love with the Red Mage class. I loved it so
I
much
should
because
have guessed that.
it has elements of healing and damage, and it's one of the few like damage classes that can also revive.
Mm,
So you can be very helpful if you're like the only one left. You could revive the healer who can then revive everybody else or something. So you can kind of be like a pinch hitter, which is like nice to be able to help out
huge.
without having the huge responsibility of being the main healer.
Yes.
So it's a very versatile class. You also get like really stylish clothes. The
Okay, that's the important
storyline,
stuff.
yeah, it is. It very much is. The storyline that you get for the job class is also very fun. There's like a dapper older cat man and like a cute little girl who kind of becomes like your little sister figure.
Aw.
And you're going out kind of like figuring stuff out. So like the class story is very fun too. And I
Yeah.
and I mentioned ninja before as well, so that's also a DPS class, which is very fun. And let's see. So I didn't stay a healer. I kind of as the game progressed and I got more into it, the pressure of like being a healer, it doesn't click with me as much. It takes a
Mhm.
lot more work and I get a lot more like stressed out because of the responsibility of it.
Yeah. Like when you're doing
Um
a raid or just playing with anybody else, really?
yeah, like when you're
Yeah.
doing raid content, that's when it's like really important, like
Mm.
raids or trials, especially if it's like the more recent stuff, because like not everybody has it down. So like that's the thing with a lot of the content in this game. If other folks have been playing it for years, but it's your first time, like they tend to know these fights kind of like dances. Like they
Mm.
know all the moves, they know how to react to stuff and how to like offset people who maybe it's their first time doing it.
Yes.
Which like you have a sprout above your head, like a little seedling above your head with your name, until you hit the end of Shadowbringers, so that it communicates to the rest of the people playing the game, oh, this is this person's first time doing this, maybe, or they're newer to the content, so like go easier on them, maybe help them out or
Yeah.
something. Which is like the community I've met with this game, everybody has been so nice and kind. Like people will try to hold back spoilers so they don't spoil the story because it's
Oh.
so good. They want people to explore it on their own terms. Um, and like if you see that somebody is in a cutscene and you're in a raid with a bunch of folks, if you're an asshole, you can go and start that fight, and then the people who are in the cutscene are just like left behind in the dust.
Mm.
But like I've only seen that once, and it was an accident when somebody accidentally like triggered the boss fight before those people
Yeah.
were done seeing the cutscene. Because normally it's just everybody just waits for them. They're like, okay, cool, you're seeing it for the first time. We'll just wait here. It's
Yeah.
like a couple minutes. Where just everybody feels so like they're so kind to one another. There's been plenty of times when I was a sprout where I just got a random gift from someone who was just like, here's his thing, and then walked away.
Yes.
Um And like I've wanted to try and pay that forward too sometimes when I will see other folks who are newer players. So it really like engenders this kindness towards other people in the world, and just being like, hey, we're all on this journey together, let's have fun, kind of. And like that has not been my perception of like multiplayer or like online games. I mean,
sure.
Normally when people talk about a game you're playing online, I'm like, oh, Call of Duty chat rooms. That sounds like a disaster nightmare. I don't want to be a part of that.
Yeah, even like because I feel like that's been like an experience I've seen and like experienced in the past with certain games too, and even like games that are less like you would think are less foster like a less toxic community, still can have like significant portions of that population that are rough to be around or like interact with. And I'm so glad to hear that your experience has been one that has been so like people have been graceful and respectful and just like sweet. That's awesome.
Yeah. And like I'm sure there's pockets of the community that aren't, because it's just so huge. Like, but and like weird drama will pop up from time to time. There was something during, was it this summer or last summer, where someone had hacked the game and got access to outfits before they were released, then made a billboard in real life with pictures of their characters wearing it, advertising a party they were putting on in the game.
This sounds familiar. Did legal action come down on them?
I think they might have. I should follow up to see what happened, but like it was basically illegal what they did. And like you had other players basically jamming their house that they had bought to like block it, like block the door and make it so they couldn't like enter or come in.
Oh my
to be
goodness.
Like, it's not okay that you did this, we're gonna punish you for it, I guess.
Oh my goodness.
And to the point where people have made like joke fan merch for it and stuff, where they meme on it. So there's like, and that's just one story of many of just like weird things that have happened throughout the years that this game has been out, like with the community and stuff. That is just kind of neat. There's also just like the musician who is behind a lot of the game's music called Soken. He has like his own band called Primals and stuff, and he's responsible for some of like the coolest music you'll ever hear in a video game. But there's this one part in Shadowbringers where you enter this forest, and the song is called Lahi, and it has a very strange lyric in it where it says like Lahi. And he did a joke performance during a concert using that automaton instrument. Do you know what those are?
Not off the top of my head, but I could look it up.
Okay. I don't know if we have a couple minutes for this or if Jeremy can edit around it.
No, but go ahead, truly.
So it's just like a funny, weird, like synthesizer thing.
Oh, I
so
see.
He comes all dressed like in a suit and is like, I'm going to play Lahi, and then plays it on the thing.
Will it surprise you to hear that the third one that's popping up on this Google search is Kirby automaton? That's incredible.
That makes sense. There's all kinds of funny things with that, but so like even one of the creators in the game made a joke like that on like stage live, and now it's become a thing where like whenever you see a streamer who's playing the game for the first time and they enter into that forest and they hear that song, you're like, okay, now I got a video for you, you have to watch this.
That's great. Just like sharing, it's like lore like there's lore in the game, and then there's like the meta of like the community like that. It's fun. That's, gosh, the more I hear, I mean, like this has already been a game for a while that I've been like, oh man, I know I'm not going to play it, but boy, in another life, I'm like one of the people who loves this game the most. I've got some more questions for you about this game. And I'll eventually get into like more of the contextual details of questions I've got for you about this. But do you, for you, like whether it's currently or in the past, what is the thing that you enjoy most about the game? Whether it's like a quest. I know you talked about loving Shadowbringers. Whether it's a quest, whether it's like teaming up with a group of people. I just wanted to like open that up for you of like another aspect that you wanted to highlight.
Well, I think it's probably what I've been talking about a lot. So tell me if I'm just saying the same stuff again. But the story of the game is actually what I like best,
Wow.
more than anything. Like,
I
it's
would
very
not have expected
engaging,
hearing that about an MMO, but that could just be
right?
like a false understanding of like the quality of writing in an MMO. So by all means,
I've
sorry to
just
interrupt.
Oh, no, you don't have to apologize. That has just been like, it's because they view it as this is a mainline Final Fantasy entry, so it needs to have the quality of writing of a game like that. Where like
Yeah.
no other MMO is written like this. That is
Hmm.
why it is such a singular, weird, cool thing that the writing and the characters are so important to them, and they kind of come first. And like people who don't care about the story can just skip it,
Yeah.
and just do fights to hit things, and that's completely fine too. But there's just been so much care and attention to detail and things that they will call back to that you did not expect them to, that like because of their skill with the writing, they probably didn't plan that shit ahead of time, but they found a really cool way to integrate a thing from like 5 years ago into the
Yeah.
current thing you're doing now and make that pay off.
Huh.
So like the more side quests you do, the more rewarded you get for just like knowing about the world and the characters and things that are going on. um and like you do get dialogue choices to an extent, like sometimes to respond, so it's not like a BioWare RPG or something where it like, can result in a character dying or something.
Yes.
But we were talking about Firewatch recently, and it's kind
Yes.
of a similar thing where it colors your perception of the character you were playing as and how the characters kind of react to you. Like you can give a more sarcastic answer, or you could give a more heroic answer.
Hmm.
There are instances where sometimes you can tease a character and maybe they're like, well, now you're in for it.
Yeah.
um so just like little interactions like that, and just by the point that you get to, God, it would probably happen like in Stormblood. Like these characters kind of feel like a second family in a way, especially because you spend so much time with them. Like I basically streamed nothing but this game for about like a year,
Yeah.
maybe more. And that was just going through the story. So each day for me, it was like, I'm sitting down and hanging out with my Final Fantasy XIV buds. What are we getting into today?
Yeah.
And it just feels like a game that is living alongside you because it is continually doing new content. You're continually seeing these characters change and grow and having new additions to the cast or having other characters like step to the background or something.
That's so cool.
Yeah, and because there's such a huge cast of characters, what they're doing with some of the more recent stuff, is just focusing on like having like 4 of them or something come with you, so they get a
Yeah.
little more time and like exposure to grow and change, which has been really
Mm.
neat to see.
So you're caught up at this point on the story, correct?
Almost.
Okay, cool.
6.5 came out a couple weeks ago.
Okay, cool.
So I have not played that yet, but I'm planning to like stream it next week, 2 weeks from now.
Okay, very, very cool. I would love to know, I'm gonna start to like ask you a little bit more about the context.
Mhm.
Which you've kind of given us. You started playing this game with a group of friends, remotely. But where I want to begin is that even though like you play this game, like I've watched you stream this game,
Mhm.
I know that you play it where you are sitting right now. For the at least what I assume is for the majority of that.
Oh
But
yeah, no, 100%.
would you, even though I can see it on the video, would you describe like the normally ask people to like do a scene painting of like where they played this game from their
Mhm.
past. So like what's describe your setup to us and just like the room that you're in a bit, as much as you'd like to.
Sure. So I am like renting a room from a friend who that friend doesn't care about like the downstairs area. So I basically get to have like my office down here. Um,
Awesome.
so I've kind of like sectioned off a corner of it. And it's actually like much bigger than what you see here. Here's like a partition that I like just made and
Oh,
put
so
up
this
there.
isn't just like you're not
Let's
in an
pictures.
office room. You've like sectioned off a part
Yeah.
of the downstairs is what you mean.
Yeah. So I'm basically like in a
Ooh,
living room. The kitchen is like 5 feet in front of
no
me.
way.
So like sometimes during recordings, my roommates will come down and like make food, and I'll have to be like, okay, can we pause for a minute? They're like making dinner
Yes,
and
of
clanging
course.
pots around. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
But like I have a whole bunch of like cool merch and like I've got a map on the wall and all this stuff that like it didn't look like this until I started playing the game. Like
Of
basically
course.
everything in my background is Final Fantasy XIV related, unless you like go up here and like, oh look, there's Heather from Silent Hill 3 and Leon from Resident Evil 2 and like
Yes.
Tally and Garrus and 9S and stuff.
That's
So I've just
amazing.
kind of like jam-packed my little area here with as much stuff as I can.
Yeah. Do
I
you
like
work in this like at your setup here as well?
Yes, yeah, it's my
Cool.
work desk for streaming and for making art and stuff.
Cool. So you spend a lot of time in that seat, like in this room.
Yes, I do. And
Yes.
this chair is so old and busted. I have like 2 pillows and a blanket behind me to
Oh
make
my
it
gosh.
comfortable. It needs to be replaced. I played a gaming chair once, Connor. It was a mistake. It like fucked up my back. I don't know
Oh
how
no.
people use those
I
things.
I used to also do the same thing where the chair that I would use, I would have like be sitting on like a pillow and have a blanket behind me because it was so stiff. But like I got this is like an office chair that I'm in that I got 3 years ago and like fully recommend and love. It may not be not it may also not be conducive to your back, but I can always send you a link.
Yeah, no, please do. I would love to have that.
Yes. So you've got, I mean, thank you for doing a little scene painting for the listener and showing me a little more as well. But from your life, whether it be broad or specific, what are some things or like moments that have colored your experience with this game? Whether it's like, oh, I was working a lot, or me and my friends were doing this. I'd love to know anything you'd like to share with us.
Yeah. I guess kind of like after my friends who I tried to get to play the game with me bounced off it, it was kind of just like my relationship with the game as a solo experience and then streaming the game with like my online community who
Yeah.
continued to grow as I was playing the game and getting through it. It's a huge thing for like folks to become emotional vampires when people are going through the game the first time to like be like, oh cool, I want to see someone's first time reaction to this insane thing that's going to happen.
Yes.
So I luckily nobody spoilered anything for me. But there was a part where one of my favorite characters in the entire game dies, and I knew that they were going to die because that part got spoiled for me, but I didn't know when. So I thought it was much further along, and I had like gotten it in my head like, oh, it must be like some sort of grander sacrifice or incident or something. And it's kind of like it's not that at all.
Oh no.
So it was a part where like I was so blindsided by it and was so like disappointed with how they handled it. This was something that happened in Heaven's Word, so it was earlier on. That I was just like, I have to turn the game off, and I like didn't come back to it for like a week.
Yeah. Wow.
So like I don't know.
Well,
Oh, sorry, go ahead.
Oh no, what were you I thought you were like looking for a new thought, but I interrupted you, I think finishing that thought.
Oh yeah, I guess I can just say that like this game was like a year and a half of my life straight, kind of. Like it felt like it was living alongside me, like it was a friend kind of to an extent.
Totally.
Where just like I was playing it like every other day, even when I wasn't streaming it, I was playing it to an extent. And just kind of like slowly getting more and more absorbed by it. And like, you know, trying to tell other people about like my experience with it. I tried like once I got further into it to try and get my old friend group to do it again. And they were like, no, I can't, or I'm playing a different game, or one of my friends had a baby, so she was like, I can't even play a game that's 5 minutes, let alone one that is like 50 hours.
You even got like some of our crew to like play it a little bit, and I thought they were going to stick with it more because it seemed like they liked it.
Yeah, like Nick was playing it with other friends before he ever played it with me, and we did like one stream playing it together, and I was going to try and get like him and Jeremy and Tyler to like play it off stream or something. Like we didn't have to do it as a stream thing, but they didn't end up sticking with it. And I was just like, yeah, whenever you guys want to play it, just hit me up, and they never did, which there's so many games coming out. I get it.
Totally. I was like excited for you and them when that was sort of happening over a couple weeks. But hey, we have a whole channel in our Discord. It's more of like a Final Fantasy in general channel at this point, but it did start out as like an FF14 channel because we have some listeners who also love the game.
I think we even had some migrants from my Discord come over too to be like, oh yeah, here's some info.
Totally. speaking of which, like, is there anything you'd like to say about like the community that you found around playing the game, whether it was like through your Discord or like your or streaming that you wanted to highlight?
Um, I guess basically I've just met so many people who have been like very helpful, and
Yeah.
like they're probably even more deep into the game than I am in many different ways. Some of them are like hardcore raiders. Some of them are folks who like never really played with other people before that much even.
Oh.
But like there's so many community streams that the game creators do. So there's a thing called like the live letter from the producer that Yoshi P and like their marketing guy and other people will sit in on, just to give you a little update of like, oh, this is what's coming in this update, to
Hmm.
tell you what's going on. And those are like live in Japan at like, I don't know, 2 a.m. our time or something. And like so much of that is harder to keep track of. And I'll have people in my community be like, oh yeah, hey, this is coming up. Are you going to be covering it or something? I'm like, oh, thank you for telling me. Yes, I am. Okay, cool.
Wow.
So like so many people who are so on the ball about stuff. I'm also a person who really like adores fan merch, like things that other artists have made, like through fan art, or like there's a lot of like plushies to my side here.
Yes.
Basically all of them are fan made, like none of these are
Oh.
official. So it just kind of like speaks to the passion and investment that people have,
Yeah.
that like they can make these super detailed fan works and stuff and share them with other people.
Yeah.
So like the art community for this game is insane. And I'm working on some fan merch of my own that got a little delayed because there was a bunch of family stuff I had to deal with this year. But I'm looking forward to getting back into that and being able to contribute more myself to like the art community surrounding this game.
That's so cool. I love like how many ways this game has like seemingly brought like enjoyment to your life, whether it be like the communities that you've become a part of or formed, or like also what you are putting out, like you're just talking about the merch of like, gosh, I love this so much, like I want to share this with people. That's so cool. I've got just a couple more things I want to ask you about this game
Yeah.
before we sort of wrap up. The first of which is there any aspect of this game that or like a moment that you had in the game, anything really that you haven't gotten to mention yet that you're like, I can't finish this episode without talking about this thing?
Okay, it's hard because like I talked about with spoilers, like if you haven't played the game, like I don't want to spoiler stuff for folks.
Sure, of course, yes.
Especially because like I said, Shadowbringers was like my when it became my favorite game, and there's so many moments in that expansion and then the updates that came after it that are just like so good. Like the
Yeah.
story is so unbelievably good. It'll make you cry because you're happy and you're sad
Dang.
because of the different things it does. But there's a part in the point 3 update after Shadowbringers, which is kind of like the ending to that expansion, where it just pays off so many character threads. The boss fight you have leading up to that, like the context behind who you're fighting is just like kind of nuts. They're sort of like the first hero, kind of like the first warrior of light, who like
Yeah.
you are the warrior of light. So it's kind of like almost fighting an alternate version of yourself in a way.
Ah.
And the context behind how all that works, it's very sad that this person is fighting you. It sucks, but they're also like an adversary you've been fighting basically since the beginning of the game.
Huh.
It's just they finally come to the forefront as like an adversary you can actually fight now, instead of just being someone who is like doing shit in the background.
Interesting.
You get helped by someone who was previously a villain who was working against you. They show up for one last second to help you. And then there's a really sad payoff with this character who has been kind of like ailing this entire time, who is just like he was just trying to help you, just trying to do his best. It's really sad that like um he doesn't make it out of that, but he comes back in like a different form to join your party, and it's just like it's so sad because you lost that character, but then he comes back in a different form in a way, who is then with you now for the rest of the journey, which is
Mm.
so great. Because all he wanted to do was go on an adventure, and
Aw.
now he gets to. So like I'm trying to dance around it without giving too many spoilers. But I've just never had a reaction to a game like that with the characters and
Yes.
everything that they had set up, like coming together in such a satisfying and like emotionally resonant way. Like,
That's cool.
yeah, there's nothing like it. So if you
Dang.
can get that far into the game and you don't love it at that point, then you have no soul, I guess. But I understand how hard it is to get to that point in the game, because it is like a lot of hours.
Totally.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm sure there is just like endless and endless things that you could discuss about this game, whether it be like, oh, I actually love these classes and this combat and this music and this specific town. But I guess, listener, check out Roxy's stream, because you're probably gonna, there's just so much more time being spent there on this game.
Yeah, I had to like
So
specifically tell Connor, like, just rein me in if I'm going on for too long, because there's literally like years of stuff with this
oh
game.
yeah,
Like, it's
that's like a tough thing. One tough thing about this podcast format is that when someone like yourself has so much experience and like depth of enjoyment with a game, one of these like overview episodes, because they are surface level in general, I would say it's tough when it's like there's so much more that you've got. So that being the case, before we do wrap this up and do the post show segments, would you do me a favor and just sort of wrap up for us the place that this game holds for you, whether it's like, broad or specific?
Yeah, I mean, I guess I kind of mentioned it before, how like this feels like a living, breathing world that like kind of grows alongside you in a way. So this game feels like a friend. That's probably the best way to describe
Cool.
it. Final Fantasy XIV is my friend. Me and Mikey joked actually when I was talking about how much I like this. He was like, "Oh, you found your video game soulmate," and I was like, "What? Okay, yeah, no, that works. Yeah, that makes sense."
I guess you nailed it, Mikey.
Yeah.
That's great. Well, Roxy, thank you so much for bringing on Final Fantasy XIV to discuss with me. This was a blast to hear from you, and I'm sure we could have done like a 10-part series on this if we
Yeah, this
really
was so
needed
much
to.
fun. Thank you for inviting me here to ramble and talk about this. It was great.
You're very welcome. And, we've known each other for a few years now, and this is a game that I know means so much to you. So I'm so glad that you got to be the person to bring it on and discuss.
Yay.
Because also, like not every episode of this podcast, in fact, most of them aren't about people's favorite games. So I'm glad that like
Oh, okay.
occasionally it happens where it's like, oh, a favorite game also hit like a meaningful like inflection point in someone's life, and this is one of those. So it was just fun for me. That being said, we're not quite done yet. I do have a couple of segments to close us out with. The first of which is, of course, the Fact Me by Your Game segment, and that's just where I share fun facts with my guest about the game they brought on today. I have just one fun fact for you, because there's endless stuff about this game that I think, and endless Easter eggs, endless tie-ins. So I found one fun fact thanks to a YouTube user called Red J, who has a fun facts about Final Fantasy XIV episode. And I have this fact titled "Bathing. Who needs it?" So, according to the item description on a grade 2 Skybuilder soap, it seems that most, the way he pronounced it was, Ishgardians do not bathe regularly.
You nailed it.
I nailed. Okay, huge.
So the pronunciation.
The item description says specifically that when combining this soap with an empty stocking, it can be used as a weapon, which, according to this description, is the most common use. It goes on to say that many residents have discovered that the need to wash themselves is mitigated by wearing thick layers of clothing. To which I say, I mean, come on, y'all. We know that it's maybe outwardly, maybe you're not getting dirt and blood and stuff on you, but you're nasty under there.
Yeah, truly. And if it's Ishgard folks, they got a lot of dragon blood all over them.
Oh yeah, and it doesn't just stick. It trickles down. It's
gross.
My big takeaway from this,
stinky elves, I guess.
Yes, I thought this was such a funny, like, little detail that like really can color the world, and I'm sure there are countless things like this in this game.
There's so many whacked out item descriptions. I've never heard that one before, though. You did find a fact I did not know. Look at you.
Huge. I feel so accomplished. But anyway, That's it for the Fact Me by Your Game segment. Just the one today. I like to have two, but that did a lot of heavy lifting.
It's very funny and weird.
The final segment is, of course, the game recommendations. Now, Roxy, this segment is my one forced tie-in to the movie Call Me by Your Name, where I'm going to treat Final Fantasy XIV like your passionate summer love that you had in Italy. But of course,
not too far off, honestly.
Yeah, really. Like the movie, your love affair is not going to last. It's going to have to come to an end. So in your time of heartbreak, I'm going to try to be a good friend and give you 3 potential new flings that will hopefully get your heart, like your mind, off of Final Fantasy XIV finally. So all 3 of these have at least one thing in common with FF14, because kind of like in the real world, when you're setting up a friend, like some familiarity can go a long way. Maybe not looking exactly or being exactly like their ex, but you get it. So all that lead up to say I've got 3 recommendations for you today. The first of which is, if you love MMOs, which now I know you really don't, it's just this one, but it's what I wrote down. If you'd rather have a much more simple MMO that, in fact, you were like, Connor, I want you to recommend an MMO to me. The only one that I've ever spent extensive time with is a game I bet you haven't even heard of. It's called FLIFE, which stands for Fly for Fun. Have you ever heard of this?
I have not. What is this?
So I'm pretty sure I've recommended this like in this segment to people before, but this is an MMORPG that my friends and I discovered. Well, it's a Korean developed and Japanese published game that came out, I think, originally in like 2004, 2005, that in a computer class, I'm more telling you my context of the game, but that in like a typing and computer proficiency class in high school, that me and my friends would obviously finish our work so quick, we would get bored and dick around on the internet. And we got this game that was a free-to-play game where it's just a very generic but fun MMO that I had so much fun exploring. You can choose your class. You're like, the characters are really cute. You can eventually fly, which is the whole, and then the title of the game is Fly for Fun. Honestly, and it's still playable today.
That was going to be my big question. I was like, how do you play this? Is it still on browser or?
Yes. You can also download an app, I think, for the computer that, like, if it's a program. But look, not a serious recommendation, but since we're talking about MMOs, I had to bring up FLIFE.
It seems cute, and I've never heard of it before, so I'm just intrigued to see something I've never heard of. So
I think, as a kid who loved video games but never played anything like this, it was really cool to be like interacting with many people or teaming up with my friends. I genuinely never played this for more than a week. I would play it for like 3 or 4 days and stop. But anyway, that's your first one.
Okay, cool.
FLIFE, yes.
FLIFE, okay.
FLYFF. Your second recommendation, I am pivoting here. I originally was going to recommend another MMO, but since I know you don't like this, here's my recommendation.
All right.
Is, if your takeaway from Final Fantasy XIV is that you don't like MMOs, but you love Final Fantasy, but you, Roxy, you've had your fill of the JRPG Final Fantasies and even some of the action ones. Yeah. I'll recommend to you Final Fantasy Tactics, which is, of course, the tactical RPG version. Have you ever played this or advanced?
So I played the Tactics one for the PlayStation 1 very briefly. Couldn't wrap my head around it as a kid. Hated it and returned it to GameStop. But I have been told by so many people that it's such a good game. And like the writer for that came to write like a raid series in Final Fantasy XIV. He's got a whole chunk of story that he's written for the game.
That's cool.
That even some of the characters come back and stuff, which would be very neat for if you like that series. There's a lot of fan service for that one.
That's cool.
Fran even shows up, who is in Ivalice, which is the tactics world.
That's right.
But like, even with all of my knowledge of that, I've never actually gone back to it and played it. So you are correct in your recommendation. I should go back and play it. There's even like a revamped PSP version of it that is sitting on my shelf unplayed, that I have no excuse for not having played it yet.
Could be worth checking out. Tactics games like can be hit or miss for me, but like I have the advanced Game Boy Advance version, which
I've
is
heard good things.
a different game, but it's also critically acclaimed. And it's every time I turn it on, I'm like, oh, this is awesome, but I don't have the time for this, so I don't play it.
Understandable. I think
yeah.
also like I've played so many more games now since then that like whatever frustrated me as a kid is probably not frustrating at all anymore.
Yeah, it totally could be more like, apt, like I guess in line with your skill set now, or like your enjoyment. So that's your second recommendation, and your final one is if the thing that you love most about this game is that you can get married. You can marry someone. And
Oh, you
which we
can.
didn't even talk about that really.
Yeah,
Are you
you can
married in
marry
the
other
game?
players. Yep, I'm not.
Oh,
No.
okay, gotcha.
One advantage it does have is it gives you an item that lets you warp directly to that person
Oh,
without like costing any in-game currency like gil. So some people literally just get married just so they can warp around for free.
hey, honestly,
Uh,
not too different from the real world.
yeah, you get some insurance benefits, I guess.
Yeah, that's great. But
Tax
if
breaks.
that's like your big takeaway from this game, then I'll recommend to you, even though there are many games you can get married in, I went back and forth on this choice. I'll recommend most of the Fire Emblem series because you can do that. And you talked about Fire Emblem Awakening earlier.
Yeah, I bought my 3DS literally for that game. It was the game I bought the system for. And I love those. I played all of Fire Emblem Three Houses on stream,
Yeah.
which I joked
Ooh.
that it was Fire Emblem One House because I recruited every single character I could except for one of them because I fucked something up. Um,
Oh, what house did you go with?
I went with Dimitri. He just very much appealed to my sensibilities, I guess. But like Claude is awesome and Edelgard is awesome. Like you can't go
Yes.
wrong with whoever you pick in that. And I need to start a new playthrough with one of those characters as my house. So
Hey.
uh that's a good recommendation.
Well, look at that. So yeah, my most generic recommendation. So I'll just go through this list again. We've got Flife, we've got Final Fantasy Tactics, and then we have most of the Fire Emblem games, which I don't even know if you can get married in most of them, but I'll throw the ones that you can get married in.
Yeah, the more recent ones you can, I think.
Yeah, that'll do it for that segment, and that'll actually bring us to the end of the show. So before we go and plug whatever we want, Roxy, thanks again for taking the time to do this. I know we get to pod together a lot, but we don't get to do it one-on-one very often, and this was a blast. Thanks for being here.
It truly was. And I think since like I don't come from an improv background like all of
Yeah.
you guys do. So many y'all are like making funny jokes one after another at each other. But here we just get to have like a relaxed conversation, which has been just really great. And
Look
I
at
love the
that.
jokey part too. Don't get me wrong. I love
Yes,
seeing you guys perform. But yeah, it's a very different vibe and I appreciate it.
of course. Well, hey, this is a blast having you on. What do you want to plug on your way out? Where can the people find you?
So I am on Twitter, Twitch, and Blue Sky as Red Mage Roxy, all one word. So very easy to find me. I stream 3 days a week. I'm going to be streaming our Games Club game, which is Resident Evil 2 Remake.
Are you
And
going to
then of
stream that
course,
tonight at all?
yes, I am
Okay, I
actually.
might have to flip that on while I'm playing something else, but that's exciting.
Yay. And of course I'm streaming Final Fantasy XIV. Like it's constantly updating. There's so much stuff to go through. And again, this game has been out for like 10 years. I've been playing it for 2. So there's even aside
Wow.
from the main story, there's so many other things to get into that I'm still playing. And
Mm.
like I'm going back and doing like Mass Effect playthroughs, and I was actually playing Shadow Hearts 2, a bunch of retro stuff. Anyway, that all of that is to say come find me on Twitch Tuesday, Thursday, and Sundays. Say hello.
Awesome. Well, thank you very much. I'll go ahead and just close this out with some plugs of my own. Of course, anything that Roxy and I plug, you can find in the show notes. The first of which for me is that the cover art for Call Me By Your Game is done by Glenn J. You can find him and his other great work on Instagram at Glenn with 2 N's .JAY. The show is produced by Jeremy Schmidt. If you'd like to give him a tip of the cap, of your cap, really, you can check out his show, Video Games, a Comedy Show, wherever you get your podcasts. It's also part of this network. I am on Twitter, Instagram, and Blue Sky. So click the link to those profiles if you want to give me a follow there. I'm on Twitch, even though I haven't been streaming very much, or really at all in the last few months, at twitch.tv/consiscool69. And lastly, is that if you like me and the conversations I have with people about video games, you got to check us out on Patreon. Our network, again, is over at patreon.com/super NPC Radio, where we have a ton of bonus video game podcasts waiting for you. I already talked about the Games Club series that we do year round. New episodes almost every single Friday out of the year. I think this year I was calculating it, and by the end, we will have done. There will only be 4 weeks without a Games Club episode, so that's 50 Games Clubs episodes just this year.
Holy shit.
And then I do a special bonus podcast on that network, a co-op version of this podcast. And it's co-op in the sense that I bring people on to talk to me about games. We don't talk about only co-op games, but the most recent release that we had, Roxy was actually featured on. We discussed Firewatch.
So much fun.
Which it's so funny because this will come out like weeks after that, but we just recorded it yesterday.
Yeah.
So very strange time traveling we're doing. And then for the month of November, we're covering the original Psychonauts. So I'm going to go through that in an overview episode with a couple of good friends. But yeah, of course, that's all at patreon.com/supernpcradio. Highly recommend you check us out there to see some awesome stuff that you could be getting every week. But that'll do it for this episode of Call Me By Your Game. We will see you on the next one.